boy who left home to find out about the shivers. A father had 2 sons. The elder was bright and clever, able to deal with anything that came his way. But the younger was so stupid that he understood nothing and could learn nothing. Everyone who saw him said, "His father will have his troubles with that one." If there was anything to be done, it was always the elder who had to do it. But if his father asked the elder son to get something at dusk, let alone at night, and if his way would have taken him through the graveyard or some other spooky place, he would say, "Oh no, father, I won't go. It gives me the shivers." Or in the evening, when stories that made your flesh creep were told around the fire, the listeners would sometimes say, "Oh, it gives me the shivers." The younger son sat in the corner and listened, but he didn't understand. "They keep saying it gives me the shivers. It gives me the shivers. It doesn't give me the shivers. It must be another one of those tricks that I just can't learn." One day, his father said to him, "Listen, you over there in the corner, you're getting big to be big and strong. You'll have to learn something to make a living by. Your brother is always working, but you are useless." "Oh, yes, father," he answered. "I'd be glad to learn something. If possible, I'd like to learn how to get the shivers. That's something I just don't understand." When he heard that, the elder son laughed and thought to himself, "My goodness, what a blockhead my brother is. He'll never come to any good. As the twig is bent, so the tree will lean." The father sighed and answered, "It won't hurt you to find out about the shivers, but it won't get you a living." A few days later, the sexton dropped in for a visit. The father unburdened himself and told him how ignorant his younger son was, how he knew nothing and learned nothing. "Just imagine, when I asked him what he wanted to do for a living, he said he wanted to learn how to get the shivers." "Well, if that's what he wants," said the sexton, "I'll teach him. Give him to me, and I'll lick him into shape." The father liked the idea because he thought the boy is bound to get something out of it. So the sexton took him to stay at his house and gave him the job of ringing the church bell. A few days later, he woke him at midnight and told him to climb up into the belfry and ring the bell. "Now you'll learn what the shivers are," he thought, and secretly went up ahead of him. When the boy came to the top and turned around to grab the bell rope, he saw a white figure on the stairs, across from the sound hole. "Who's there?" he cried, but the figure didn't answer and didn't move. "Answer me!" the boy cried out. Go away. You've no business here in the middle of the night." But the sexton stood there without moving, to make the boy think he was a ghost. The boy cried out a second time, "What are you doing here? Answer me if you're an honest man, or I'll throw you down the stairs." He wouldn't do that, the sexton thought. And he didn't utter a sound and stood there like a stone. The boy called out a third time, and when that didn't help, he braced himself and pushed the ghost down the stairs. And the ghost tumbled down 10 steps and lay still in a corner. Then the boy rang the bell, went home, and lay down without saying a word. The sexton's wife waited a long time for her husband to come home, but he didn't come back. Finally, she got worried, woke the boy and asked, "Do you know what's become of my husband? He went up to the belfry ahead of you." "No," the boy answered, "but somebody was standing on the stairs across from the sound hole. And when he wouldn't answer me and soundly go away, I thought he was up to no good, so I pushed him down the stairs. Go take a look. You'll see if it was him. I'd be very sorry." The wife went to the belfry and found her husband lying there in the corner groaning. He had broken his leg. She carried him home and and ran screaming and ranting to the boy's father. "Your boy has done something terrible," she cried. "He's thrown my husband down the stairs and broken his leg. Get the good-for-nothing out of our house." The father was horrified. He went down to the sexton's house and gave the boy a piece of his mind. "What godless thing have you done now? The devil must have put you up to it." "Father," he said, "just listen. I'm perfectly innocent. He was standing there in the night like someone that's up to no good. I didn't know who he was, and I warned him 3 times to say something or to go away." "Heavens above," said the father, "with you I never have anything but trouble. Get out of my sight. I don't want to see you any more." "Yes, Father, gladly. Just wait till it's light and I'll go away and learn to get the shivers. Then at least I'll know something to earn a living by." "Learn whatever you like," said the father. "It's all the same to me. Here are 50 tailors. Take them and go out into the wide world, but never tell a soul where you came from or who your father is, because I'm ashamed of you." "Yes, Father, as you please. If that's all you ask of me, it won't be hard to remember." When the day dawned, the boy put his 50 tailors in his pocket and went out on the high road, and all the while he mumbled to himself, "If only I could get the shivers! If only I could get the shivers!" Then a man overtook him and heard the conversation the boy was having with himself. When they had gone on a little way and the gallows came in sight, he said, "Look, there is a tree where 7 have celebrated their marriage to the rope-maker's daughter, and now they're learning to fly. Sit down under it and wait until night comes. Then you'll get the shivers all right." "Well, if that's all there is to it," said the boy, "it will be easy. If I learn to get the shivers as quickly as all that, I'll give you my 50 tailors. Come back in the morning." Then the boy went to the gallows, sat down under it, and waited for night to fall. Since he was cold, he made a fire, but by midnight the wind was blowing so cold that in spite of the fire he couldn't get warm. And when the wind buffeted the hanged men so they all knocked together and swung back and forth, he thought, "Well, if I'm freezing down here by the fire, imagine what it must be like for them up there." Being a kind-hearted boy, he took a ladder, climbed up, untied them one by one, and brought them down, all 7. Then he stirred up the fire and blew on it, and sat them all around it to warm themselves. But they sat motionless, and the fire took hold of their clothes. "Be careful," he said, "or I'll hang you up again." But the dead men didn't hear him. They didn't say a word, and they just let their rags burn. That made him angry, and he said, "If you won't be careful, I can't help you. Next thing you know, you'll set me on fire." And he hung them up again one by one. Then he sat down beside his fire and fell asleep. In the morning, the man came back for his 50 tailors. "Well," he said, "now do you know what the shivers are?" "No," he replied. "How could I? Those fellows up there didn't open their mouths. They're so stupid they let the few rags they have on their backs catch fire and burn." The man saw he wouldn't get any 50 tailors that day. As he was going away, he said, "I never saw anybody like that before." The boy started off too, and again he talked to himself. "Oh, if I could only get the shivers! Oh, if I could only get the shivers!" A carter who was walking along behind him heard him and asked, "Who are you?" "I don't know," said the boy. "Where are you from?" "I don't know." "Who is your father?" "Well, I mustn't say." "What is it you keep mumbling the whole time?" "Oh," said the boy, "I wish I could get the shivers, but no one can teach me how." "That's a lot of nonsense," said the carter. "Forget it. Come with me and I'll get you a place to stay." The boy went with the carter, and in the evening they came to an inn where they decided to spend the night. As they stepped into the hall, he said it again in a loud voice, "If only I could get the shivers! If I could only get the shivers!" The innkeeper heard him and laughed. "If that's what you want," he said, "I believe it can be arranged." "Don't say such things," said the innkeeper's wife. "Think of all the foolhardy fellows who have lost their lives. What a shame if those pretty eyes were never to see the light of day again." But the boy said, "Well, I don't care how hard it is. I want to learn, and that's what I left home for." And he gave the innkeeper no peace until he told him about a haunted castle nearby, where a man could easily learn all about the shivers if he was willing to spend 3 nights there. The king had promised his daughter in marriage to the man who could do it, and she was the most beautiful maiden under the sun. Besides, there were great treasures in the castle guarded by evil spirits. Those treasures would be set free and could make a poor man very rich. Many had already gone in, but none had come out again. The next morning, the boy went to the king and said, "If you let me, I'd like to spend 3 nights in the haunted castle." The king looked at him, and because he liked him, he said, "Well, you can ask for 3 things to take with you into the castle, but they must be lifeless things." He replied, "Then give me a fire, a lathe and a woodcarver's bench, and a knife." The king had these taken up to the castle the next day. At nightfall, the boy went in, made a bright fire in one of the rooms, set up the woodcarver's bench with the knife beside it, and sat down on the lathe. "Oh, if I could only get the shivers," he said. "But I won't learn in this place either." Toward midnight, he thought he'd stir up the fire. As he was blowing on it, he suddenly heard voices from the corner. "Meow, meow, we're so cold." "Fools," he cried, "what's the good of screaming? If you're cold, come sit by the fire and warm yourselves." No sooner had he spoken than 2 big black cats took a great leap to where he was sitting, sat down on either side of him, and looked at him with their wild, fiery eyes. After a while, when they had warmed themselves, they said, "Friend, how about a game of cards?" "Why not?" he replied. "But first, show me your paws." And when they stretched out their claws, "My goodness," he said, "what long nails you have. Wait, I'll have to cut them before we begin." With that, he seized them by the scruffs of their necks, lifted them up on the woodcarver's bench, and made their paws fast in the vise. "Now that I've seen your fingers," he said, "I don't feel like playing cards any more." Then he killed them and threw them out into the pond. But when he had got rid of those 2 and was sitting down by his fire again, black cats and black dogs on red-hot chains came rushing out from every nook and cranny, more and more of them, until there was no place for him to escape to. They yelped and screamed horribly, trampled his fire, tore it apart, and tried to put it out. He looked on calmly for a while, but then, when he had had enough, he seized his knife, shouted, "Get out, you no-goods," and lashed out at them. Some ran away, but he killed the rest and threw them into the pond. When he came back, he blew up his fire from the sparks and warmed himself. As he was sitting there, he could hardly keep his eyes open, and he wanted to sleep. He looked around and saw a big bed in the corner. "That's just what I need," he said, and lay down. But as he was closing his eyes, the bed began to roll of its own accord and went rolling all around the castle. "Perfect," he said, "better and better." And on it rolled as though drawn by 6 horses through doorways and up and down stairs. All of a sudden, 1, 2, 3, it turned upside down and lay on top of him like a mountain. But he threw off the blankets and pillows, climbed out, and said, "Now, if you have a mind, go right on rolling." And then he lay down by his fire and slept until daylight. In the morning, the king came in. When he saw him lying on the floor, he thought the ghost had killed him and he was dead. "What a pity," he said, "such a handsome boy." The boy heard him, sat up, and said, "Not so fast." The king was amazed, but he was glad too, and asked how he had made out. "Pretty well," he said. "One night has passed, and the 2 others will pass too." When the boy turned up at the inn, the innkeeper's eyes nearly popped out of his head. "Well, I never expected to see you alive again," he said. "Have you found out what it is to have the shivers?" "No," he said, "it's hopeless. If only someone could tell me." On the second night, he went back to the castle, sat down by the fire, and started talking to himself the old lament. "If I could only get the shivers." At the approach of midnight, a din and a hubbub were heard, first softly, then louder and louder. Then it was still for a while, and then, with loud screams, half a man came flying down the chimney and fell in front of him. "Hey," he said, "that's not enough. Where's the other half?" Then the noise started up again, howling and raging, and the other half fell down. "Wait," said the boy, "I'll stir the fire up for you." And when he had stirred up the fire, he looked around. The two halves had put themselves together, and a horrible man was sitting at the bench. "That wasn't our bargain," said the boy. "The bench is mine." The man tried to push him away, but the boy wouldn't let him. He shoved him with all his might and sat down at the bench again. Then more men came tumbling down the chimney, one after another. They produced 9 dead men's thigh bones and 2 skulls, and started playing ninepins. The boy felt like playing, and he asked, "Hey, can I join you?" "Sure, if you've got money." "Plenty of money," he said, "but those balls aren't really round." So he took the skulls, sat down at the lathe, and turned them until they were round. "There," he said, "now we'll be able to bowl right. Whee, what a game we'll have." He played and lost some of his money, but then the clock struck 12 and they all disappeared. Then he lay down and fell into a peaceful sleep. The next morning the king came in to inquire. "Well, how'd you make out this time?" he asked. "Oh, I played ninepins and lost a few coppers." "Didn't you get the shivers?" "Go on," said the boy. "I just enjoyed myself. If only I knew what the shivers were." On the third night, he sat down on his bench again and said sadly, "If I could only get the shivers." When it grew late, 6 big men came in carrying a coffin. "Ha ha," he said, "that must be my cousin who died a few days ago." He beckoned with his finger and cried out, "Come out, cousin, come out." They set the coffin down on the floor. He went over and took the lid off. There was a dead man lying inside. The boy felt his face, but it was cold as ice. "Wait," he said, "I'll warm you a little." He went over to the fire, warmed his hand, and put it on the dead man's face, but it stayed cold. When that didn't help, he remembered that when 2 lie in bed together, they warm each other. So he put him into the bed, covered him up, and got in with him. After a while, the dead man warmed up and began to move. Then the boy said, "See, cousin, I've warmed you, haven't I?" But the dead man shouted, "Now I'm going to strangle you!" "What?" cried the boy. "Boy, is that my thanks? Back you go in your coffin." And at that he picked him up, tossed him in, and closed the lid. Then the 6 men came and carried the coffin away. "I just can't get the shivers," said the boy. "I'll never learn how in this place, not if I live to be 100. Then a man came in. He was bigger than all the others and terrifying to look at. But he was old and had a long white beard. "You little scamp," he cried out, "now you'll find out about the shivers, 'cause you're going to die." "Not so fast," said the boy. "If you want to kill me, you'll have to catch me." "I'll catch you all right," said the monster. "Take it easy and stop bragging. I'm as strong as you, probably stronger." "We'll see about that. If you're stronger than I am, I'll let you go. Come on, we'll give it a try." Then he led him through dark passages to a smithy, picked up an axe, and with one blow struck the anvil into the ground. "I can do better than that," said the boy, and went to the other anvil. The old man came up beside him to watch, and his white beard hung down. The boy seized the axe, split the anvil at one stroke, and crammed the old man's beard in the crack. "Now I've got you," he said. "Now who's going to die?" And he picked up an iron rod and rained blows on the old man until he whimpered and begged him to stop and promised to give him great riches. The boy pulled out the axe and let the old man go, whereupon the old man led him back to the castle, and there in the cellar showed him 3 chests of gold. "One part is for the poor," he said, "one part is for the king, and the third is for you." At that, the clock struck 12, the ghost disappeared, and the boy was standing in the dark. "Never mind," he said, "I'll find my way out." He groped until he found his room, and then he went to sleep beside his fire. In the morning, the king came in and said, "This time I bet you've learned what the shivers are." No, he replied, what can they be? My dead cousin was here, and then an old man with a beard turned up. He showed me a lot of money down in the cellar, but nobody told me what the shivers are. Then the king said, well, you've set the castle free, and you shall marry my daughter. Well, that's all well and good, he replied, but I still don't know what the shivers are. The gold was brought up, and the wedding was celebrated, but much as the young king loved his wife, and happy as he was, he kept saying, if I could only get the shivers, if I could only get the shivers. In the end, it got on his wife's nerves. Never mind, said her lady's maid, leave it to me, I'll give him the shivers. She went out to the brook that ran through the garden and brought her mistress a whole pail full of minnows. That night, when the young king was sleeping, his wife pulled off the blanket and emptied the pail full of cold water and minnows on top of him. The little fishes flipped and wriggled all over him. He woke up and cried out, oh, dear wife, I'm shivering, I'm shivering. Now at last I know what the shivers are.